Hello and welcome back. We are back here with the On the Sideline podcast. I am joined here, as always, by the man who many say is as electric to watch as Kyler Murray. Kyle, how are you doing?
I don't know about as electric. I'm something, all right. I'm doing good. I took a whole chunk out of my workday today. Instead of actually working, I was preparing for my college football bets. So I'm zeroing in on a Heisman pick. I'm zeroing in on some futures bets. Ignored the entire Red Sox season collapsing before my eyes. That's how I spent my day.
Yeah, Kyle, I went to a Rays Red Sox game, and since then, the teams are just completely flipped. Maybe I'm good luck for the Rays and bad luck for the Red Sox.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I saw Ohtani play. I guess I had that going for me.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. That's something.
For those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, I had a take where I said I thought Ohtani was overrated a month into the season, and then he's done nothing but hit home runs since I said that. It's been insane. Just despite me, he keeps hitting home runs.
Yeah, I mean, he's the best hitter in baseball. I think his pitching's a little overrated, but he's still getting guys out. So
yeah, it's incredible. So we have a hashtag fun show. We're back. Sorry for missing last week. If you follow us on Twitter on the sideline JK, you would know that we missed last week. Just with the whole moving and everything, we had to push it back a week. So and then we were going to do it yesterday. But my internet wasn't working until today, so a lot of chaos going on. But happy to talk some football, and we got a good division to talk about with the NFC West.
Yes. I've been, like I said, I've been going through and ranking each of these divisions as we've gone through each of these previews. This is the division I have as the second best division in football. I have it just behind the AFC North because I like a couple of teams in the AFC North a little bit more, but I do see that I see a realistic path to all four of these teams making the playoffs. Obviously they can't all realistically make the playoffs, but I do see a scenario where all four of these teams. Well, yeah, that's true, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind. Well,
yeah,
it's a very unlikely scenario where all four of them make the playoffs.
Right.
But I do see a scenario where all four of them can make it. So we're going to go through that. Like I said, I've ranked this division. I've gone from 4 to 1. And then from there, Jackson is going to break down each position group, and we're going to talk about each of these teams in depth. You're going to learn about each of these teams in the NFC West and who we like and who we don't like.
Yes. Also, should just say at the start of the show, we plan on next week being back at same time that we have been, which would be Sunday at 5 in the afternoon. So should be back on a normal schedule from here on out until the regular season starts and we get to our twice a week. So, So Kyle, are you ready to just get into it?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. You want me to go with number 4?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So I do feel like that there's some times where you watch a team and it just doesn't work. There's a season where things just don't work and everything kind of blows up. And it's really hard to predict it happening. And sometimes things just look bad and it's I don't know if it's a combination of a team just having bad roster makeup, a team just looking stale with a lot of continuity. Maybe they need to shake things up. I just have this weird hunch that it's happening in this team this year. So with number 4, I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks.
Wow, Seattle Seahawks. So I believe you said to preview it that we were going to have some hot takes for this podcast. This is the hot take, Kyle. I think Seattle Seahawks, they won 12 games last year. Broad strokes, why do you? And we'll get more into it, obviously. But broad strokes, why do you feel this way?
Yeah, so I mean, I just think the second half of the season, I did not love this team. I don't really love the roster makeup of this team. I just think I look at this roster and this team, and there's just a lot of things that this team is really bad at. And they basically ask for 2 or 3 guys to make up for what I think are a lot of bad situations with this team. And I think that's ultimately going to shoot them in the foot because they're asking for 3 guys to play superhero football. And as we saw towards the end of the year with this team, you can't always ask that, and it's not always fair to ask that from your guys. So I think that's ultimately going to hurt them, and I'm just not a huge fan of this team, and I do feel like this is kind of in for a day of reckoning with the Seahawks. I think that there's going to be some shakeups after this season, and I think it starts with this year.
Wow, so this is surprising. First off, unrelated, you said shoot them in the foot, and Jason Witten has forever ruined that phrase for me because I can't not hear kicking themselves in the foot after he said that on one of the broadcasts. But obviously, start off Pete Carroll. He was the 16th head coach, so it's mediocre. He does gain a little bit, but basically not moving the needle there. And again, it's not 16th in terms of what he's done historically. We all know what Carroll has done historically. It's right now. I think the biggest thing that is going against this team finishing fourth is Russell Wilson, who, even if he didn't have a perfect season last year, he was still a tier 1 quarterback. He's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks for the past, 7 seasons. He's basically had tier 1 quarterback play. He's a guy you can bet on to have tier 1 quarterback play in 2021.
Yeah, and he still didn't get an MVP vote, right?
No, still Bobby Wagner with more MVP votes than Russell Wilson.
Yeah, so I think this was my thing. So I'll start with Wilson. That second half of the season was really weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just tailed off for him, and yards per attempt went down. A lot of stuff went down. He's always been a high sack guy because he just holds the ball way too long. He's always going to be a high sack guy, but he makes up for it with some fantastic plays. And honestly, we were all happy at the beginning of the season looking at the Seahawks team and saying, oh, look, this is the new look Seahawks. They're going to throw the ball early and often. They're going to do all this stuff. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, Russell Wilson throws a great deep ball. DK Metcalf is huge and fast, and he can run deep. They have all these options. Let's just defend the deep ball. And it just seemed like the Seahawks offense went back to what it did, which is run the ball a whole bunch. And, Pete Carroll went back kind of into his comfort zone. And then this is my thing with Pete Carroll too. So then that's my Wilson issue. I still think he's a great quarterback, but it was weird to see him at the end of the year struggle so much at times. And then I'm looking at Pete Carroll, and it's like, if you're just going to go back to this run first offense that you did at the end of the year, and you're not going to be a good defensive coach, then what exactly are you as a head coach? And that's the biggest questions I have with Carroll, and why, if they struggle this season, I could see him on his way out.
Yeah, we'll maybe get into the defense a little bit more when we talk about the defense. I think that's fair. I don't know how run-heavy the offense got. I would have to look at the numbers at it. It didn't seem overly run-heavy to me, but I did feel like there was a point when Wilson kind of needed to take some pressure off. Also, I forgot the banner. Put that up now. Where Wilson kind of, I felt like it helped Wilson to have a decent running game. And to transition there, Chris Carson's good. You have Chris Carson, you have Rashad Penny, who actually has 5.1 yards per carry in 161 career carries. So maybe that's a little bit interesting stat I didn't know. And then Travis Homer, who I'm talking about only because a great last name, Travis Homer. This ended up being a tier 3 running back room, but it was one spot away from tier 2, although tier 2 and 3 give you the same amount of points. So kind of irrelevant, but it's an okay running back room.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. I think the big thing was once Chris Carson started missing some games last season, it really started to struggle, I felt like. And that was kind of what derailed this offense, I thought, a whole lot too. So I think they need Carson to stay healthy, or they're going to have to find a really dependable guy as a number 1 guy that takes his spot. I think Penny's a good number 2. And honestly, I thought he'd be a better number 1 coming out of college. It just hasn't seemed like it's translated fully. So I think that they need Carson to stay on the field this season.
Yeah, that's interesting. We'll also talk about if Russell Wilson's the best thing about this team, the next best thing is their receiving core. Really, with the DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett 1-2 punch, one of the better 1-2 punches in the league. Where it gets interesting is that third option. You have Freddie Swain, who's not great. He's not necessarily someone you would feel comfortable being a top 3 receiver heading into the season. You also have Dwayne Eskridge, who they drafted. People didn't love it, but he's not the guy I would have drafted, but it probably, the position I don't hate necessarily. For tight ends, you have Gerald Everett, who's a solid all-around tight end. He might be that third option. You also have Will Dissly, who's sort of a slightly worse version of Everett. It's a tier 2 receiving room for me. I think the lack of that true third option is what bumps it down to tier 2 instead of tier 3. But again, the highlight is the Metcalf Lockett 1-2 combo.
You had it as tier 2, you said?
Yeah, tier 2.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that feels fair. I think the hype on DK Metcalf as a top 6 receiver in football, although saying someone's a top 5 receiver in the NFL is turning into, oh, he's a top 20 player in the NBA. Yeah. You can't have 30, top 5 receivers in the NFL. There can only be 5. Right. But he's someone that's always lumped in that conversation, especially because he's so fun to watch. He's getting there. He's obviously a fantastic option. So that's a really good 1-2 punch. And I've said this before on this podcast. Gerald Everett is the guy when I'm high on, he'll have like 3 catches for like 12 yards. And then when I'm low on Gerald Everett, he'll have like 8 catches for 72 yards and 2 touchdowns. I have no idea what to think about Gerald Everett half the time, but he needs to be the consistent third option. You're right. He needs to be consistently at that 6-7 catch range. He can't be the guy who's having 3 catches the next week. And otherwise it's gonna hurt the offense.
Yeah. I mean, to talk about Metcalf for a second, he did finish 7th last year in receiving yards. Like, yeah, he had over 1,300 yards last year. So if we're just talking that, like, maybe he's not a top 5 guy. I wouldn't call him a top 5 guy, but is he a true number 1? I say yes.
Yeah, I would say so too. I mean, I would take him in New England in a heartbeat, and that's my test if you're a number 1 receiver.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. It's probably fair that, if he's on like Tampa Bay, is he even a top 2 receiver? Probably. I'd probably have him over Godwin, but I think there's a debate. So he's not the most elite, but I think he's great. And I also think Lockett's one of the real underrated guys in this league. I think he's really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fantastic too. An excellent route runner. He does a lot of things really well. 100 catches last year I thought was huge. And so I mean, I think this is a great combination of players. It's just, what is the depth behind him? And I don't know. I just feel like with a lot of these Seahawks guys, and kind of what I've been getting at is like, if one guy goes down, it kind of derails what this team is, isn't it? If Carson goes down, it's like they can't run the ball. How successful is this team if one are locked? I mean, obviously you can say, oh, well, if injuries can derail a lot of teams. But at the same time, like, I just look at some of the teams, like if the Rams lose like Cooper Kupp, are we saying the Rams season's over?
Right.
I could honestly see the Seahawks often struggling if one of Metcalf or Lockett goes down. And I think that's the big issue with this team.
It's a great point. Basically, every team is screwed if they lose their starting quarterback, but they have other guys where they're kind of screwed with. Maybe I think they could make it work without Carson, but you're right. Losing Metcalf or Lockett, that's a huge blow. And to move on, to finish off the offense, this offensive line, it's been an issue for a while. It's not atrocious, but it's not good. Dwayne Brown, clearly the bright side, but then you have the other tackle would be Brandon Shell. For guards, Gabe Jackson, who, Jordan Simmons, who might not even be the starter. That's who I have listed as a starter. Could be someone else. That spot's a little bit up for grabs. And center, Damian Lewis. This is a tier 4 offensive line for me. I think it was better last year than maybe it could have been. I think it's not atrocious. It's not a black hole, but it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, you've been on this for quite a while now, and you're right on it. I mean, this isn't the worst offensive line in football, and it gets talked about like it. It gets talked about like it's the worst offensive line all the time because we just see highlights of Wilson running around. But a lot of those plays are on Wilson. It's Wilson's fault that he's running around because that's kind of the player he is. Now you take the good with the bad with Wilson because the good is obviously among the best in the league. But he takes bad sacks. He has bad tendency to hold the ball and try and wait for the perfect option sometime. So you can't blame the offensive line for all of it. That being said, it's not a great offensive line option. And then their best player is also 35, which is, a little reason for skepticism too.
Yeah, I agree. So offense, it's a good offense. It's 7th best in football. But again, where would they be without Russell Wilson? It's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, they're asking him to do a whole lot for this team. They're asking those 2 receivers to do a lot for this team. So it's kind of relying on those couple of guys, and they really got to hold up their end of the bargain for this team to be successful.
Yeah, although I guess I'll say this on the flip side, this happens a lot. Like, I'm a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, and I remember there was a lot of games during the playoffs last year when people would say, man, if they didn't have Vasilevsky, they would have lost 7-0 or 7-3 or whatever. And the flip side is, well, we have Vasilevsky. For the Seahawks, the flip side is, well, they have Russell Wilson. Sure, they're heavily reliant on a few guys, but they have those guys at least.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously can look at, I think when we did the quarterback rankings, you had Wilson 4.
Yeah.
And I had Josh Allen 4 and Wilson 5. But, regardless, that's a tier 1 quarterback. He's been in the top 5 conversation for the last few years now. So, he's just always going to be in that conversation. There's nothing really I could say bad about him or this team. I guess the one thing you could say is, like, even when you watch this team play, New England was a 1-score win. Dallas was a 1-score win. Miami was a 1-score win. Minnesota was a 1-point win. San Francisco, they beat by 10, and San Francisco was injured like crazy. Arizona was a 1-score win. Philadelphia was a 1-score win. New York was like a 30-score win.
In fairness, that Philadelphia game was like there was like an all-time like backdoor cover of a touchdown, an inconsequential touchdown with like 2 seconds left. Yeah,
but then Washington's.
But you're right. Your point is right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they had 2 wins last year that I'm looking at right now. 3 wins, including the San Francisco game, that were by more than 1 score, and one of those was the Jets. So
right.
I mean, this is a team that I think plays with fire sometimes, and they ask Wilson to bail them out. They're lucky that he's able to do it so often. And I think part of the conversation has to be, is he actually happy there? I think that's the conversation we've had this offseason. It hasn't been quite Aaron Rodgers level of issues, but there's certainly been hints dropped that he is not as happy as people thought he would be in Seattle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, you said, what do you criticize about this team? Well, you criticize the defense. I mean, the defense was not it figured itself out midway through the season. I'm growing less and less of a fan of this Pete Carroll cover 3 zone. It worked so well for so long. I think it's ran its course, and I think that there's things you got to do to change it. Their coverage unit to start it off, you have Othello Witherspoon, who Pro Football Focus actually graded as the 6th best corner in football. I'm not quite sure I'd say it's that high, but he's a good player. You have Trey Flowers as well, not the guy in Detroit, different Trey Flowers, TRE, no Y. You also have Trey Brown, another guy spells it TRE, who was a 4th-round selection. You have DJ Reed, who's from San Francisco and played well there. You also have Ugo Amandi, who was a 4th rounder in 2019, and this has been okay. Then for safeties, Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs. It's a good safety combo. And for linebackers, Bobby Wagner, who is obviously elite, although his coverage not as good last year as it's been in previous years. And then Jordan Brooks, who I like. The real issue with this team is just outside of Witherspoon, what is their cornerback situation? And I just don't know. I think that they could really use. I'm not sure if they have a 3rd corner, quite frankly. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh on Trey Flowers, but I'm not sure if there's a guy who I feel good about as a 3rd corner, let alone a number 2. This is, again, they have talent with Adams, with Diggs, with Wagner, with Witherspoon. It's still a tier 4 coverage unit for me because you have to have that cornerback depth or you're going to get burned. Look at Green Bay, perfect example. I don't care how good Jair Alexander is. When Kevin King's lined up next to him, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and then I was talking about this last year, and I still kind of feel this way. The system doesn't help them also be successful, I feel like, and you touched on this too. Is it fair to say that maybe the cover 3 scheme, just base defense, looks really good when you have the best coverage free safety this side of Ed Reed in the back of your defense with Earl Thomas, and when you don't have a player like Earl Thomas back there, it's bound to struggle a lot more with covering ground?
Well, not even just Earl Thomas, but with Richard Sherman, who's probably the best cover 3 corner to ever play. So you got both of those. That made it so effective. Not to mention Cam Chancellor. So it's like you have to have the talent to make it work. And typically, I'm kind of the belief at this point that you pretty much want to play zone coverage primarily when your team just isn't good enough to play man coverage. That's pretty much the only reason I feel like. But what Tennessee did were a few games in, like, we can't play man with our corners. Let's just go to zone, and they won't get burned as much. I think that's where cover 3. That's the place cover 3 has in the NFL at this point, I think.
Yeah, and then of course, I think the one conversation we have to have is the Jamal Adams conversation. Mm-hmm. Is this guy going to actually want to cover in the NFL? It seems a little harsh, but he worked really hard to get this move to Seattle, and he looks like a really good strong safety, and I'm still a huge fan of his game. But there was times where he just looked like a glorified defensive end on the field. He wasn't very good in coverage, I thought, last season. And that's somewhere that he really is going to have to improve because it was the weakest part of their team all season. And it wasn't like he was putting any effort to make it better. I know it's not the strongest part of his game, but if you're going to be that level of a safety, you have to be able to help this team get better at that spot.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where that's not what he does. If you're trying to listen, Mike Trout's the best player in football. If you're trying to improve your secondary, you don't trade for Mike Trout, right? Like you don't put someone in a different position. That's not what he's great at. And quite frankly, I think we were all a little bit confused by this move because we felt like, well, Jamal Adams fits best in kind of a cover one man scheme, which isn't that different from the Seattle cover three. They still were able to blitz him more, be a bit more creative, but it was a weird fit, and it felt like a weird fit at last year. Although I would say he was played out of position a lot, primarily due to injuries as well. I think Jamal Adams is better than maybe some numbers would indicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is fair because he's obviously a one of one in what he can do. But I just feel like if they're going to ask him to fill this role and play this kind of style, he's also got to be able to bring it. And I don't know if he has that capability in him, or maybe they're just setting him up to fail because that's not what he's good at.
Yeah, I think so. Front seven, the run defense was actually, I think the run defense overperformed the talent. And again, part of that is just when you play cover three, you stop the run well. So that's kind of the flip side is we can complain about the coverage. Well, at least they can stop the run. I have this as a tier 2 run defense. The interior, you got Al Woods, who's fine, Poona Ford, who's good, and then LJ Collier, who hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype, but isn't a mess either. He's above replacement level for sure. The edge guys, Kerry Hyder and Darrell Taylor, seem to be the edge guys. He was a Darrell Taylor, a second-round pick. And then I already talked about the linebackers. The linebackers are really what helps the run defense. I think the run defense will be good. I have major concerns about their pass rush. I have it as a tier 5 pass rush. So tier 2 run defense, but tier 5 pass rush. And also their kicker, Jason Myers, tier 2. So that's where I have everything there.
Yeah, I mean, so Jamal Adams is their best pass rusher, as we were just saying. So, yeah. I mean, you take that basically with what you will. I mean, I think there's two big problems with this team. That also why I'm a little lower on it, and that's KJ Wright and Jaron Reed are gone. I thought those were big parts of their defense last year. KJ Wright, especially in the coverage at linebacker spot, because he was still really good in coverage. Jaron Reed, I thought, was really good up the middle, and they're missing both of those guys, and I think that's going to be a problem for this team that also has holes everywhere else on their defense. So I feel like it's asking a lot from Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams, kind of like their offense. They're asking two guys to kind of fix everything, and I don't know if they're going to be able to put enough Band-Aids up to stop it from leaking.
Yeah, also, I forgot to mention Carlos Dunlap as well on the edge. But again, I like Dunlap, but they're basically needing Dunlap to be like Khalil Mack to make this edge rusher situation work, which he's not.
Yeah, no, he is definitely not. But at the same time, he's fine, but he's not going to be the answer that fixes everything. And I just don't think the Seahawks have a lot of answers for this stuff.
Yeah, so with my ratings, I give them 7th best offense, 20th best defense. But here's where we disagree. I have them as a 10.83 win team. They are 9th best in the NFL, 6th best in the NFC. You only have them 4th best in the NFC West. So we are very different. I guess our criticisms are similar, are relatively the same. I just think that this team works. I think that a team that's built on a wide receiver, good wide receivers, and a great quarterback, that works in today's NFL. So that's kind of, I think, where we differ is it's not necessarily how we feel about the team. It's more just about how we feel this team does in the NFL.
I think one of the things I just feel like about this team is I feel like a lot of this can go wrong really quickly for them. And a lot of it is because, a lot of their core that was a part of that Super Bowl are guys they brought on, like Dwayne Brown. They're not getting any younger. If Bobby Wagner starts to slip up a little bit, how bad is this defense? Like, is it the 20th best defense in football? No, it's probably close to the 30th best defense at that point if Bobby Wagner's struggling. If Dwayne Brown's struggling and Russell Wilson's still up to his same tricks, how bad is Russell Wilson going to have to run for his life if Dwayne Brown's not playing at his highest level? And then, we've talked about the personnel and does the personnel match the scheme they like to run? Is Pete Carroll going to ever be willing to adjust anything to suit players on his team? Is that ever going to happen? I don't know if we're ever going to see that too. And I think that's one of the things I have an issue with the Seahawks is I think there is talent on this team. We've talked about it. Bobby Wagner is still really great. Jamal Adams is still a great player. Lockett, Metcalf, Brown, Wilson, they're still talented players, but how are they going to be maximized on this team and how are they going to hold up throughout the season?
Well, let me count it out a bit. I mean, their defense did improve vastly in the second half. Granted, the first half was abysmal, and they deserve criticism for it. But the second half did turn it around. And if you're the Seahawks, you want to have success in the playoffs because I think this is the playoff team. I think this is a 10-win team. So if they can just keep their head above water and then get it done at the end, isn't that good?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if they're going to be able to do it. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this team. But I don't know. There's not a whole ton of logic behind it, but I just feel like there's a hunch that this team's going to fall off a little bit.
All right. Well, that's part of what's interesting too. Is I think you agree the Seahawks don't feel like a last place team. It's the NFC West.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. Is I say this, and it's like 9-8 might be the last place team in this division. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard to tell where that's going to end up with this team.
Yeah, I do have a sub 500 team in this division, but why don't you go ahead? Where are you going with team number 3?
I have a feeling this is going to be your sub 500 team. This is going to be the Arizona Cardinals. I think that this team has addressed some of its needs. I thought it addressed especially the offensive line. I think it should be a little bit better. I think their defensive line is going to be pretty good. If they keep Chandler Jones and figure that stuff out, hopefully they do. I think that they address some of their linebacker issues, especially in the draft with Xavier Collins. I do think that they did sacrifice some things and are a little worse in different spots too, but I still feel like that it's a pretty good football team, and I still think that they're going to be competing for a wild card spot, kind of like what they were up until the end of the year last year. So I got the Cardinals here at number 3.
Yeah, I don't entirely disagree. This, spoiler alert, this was my sub 500 team. It starts with, Kyler Murray, I have as a tier 3 quarterback. The reality is, I made a whole video on this. There's so much he does well. The passing deep down the field. He can't really throw over the middle that well. That's just, you look at the numbers, it's way worse when he's throwing over the middle. And when you talk about Cliff Kingsbury, who's the head coach, who finished 21st in our head coaching rankings, it seems like he's still trying to make stuff happen. Make things easier on Kyler. Let him throw the ball deep, where he's like the most accurate deep ball player in the league, weirdly, even though he's not that accurate 15 yards down the field. Have him do that more, run play actions more. And I think Kyler in the right situation could be a tier 2 quarterback, potentially even a tier 1 quarterback. But as of right now, with Kingsbury, I don't see him better than a tier 3.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's ways he can improve, and I think he is going to get better at times. But, I mean, the biggest question with this team, I feel like right now, is Cliff Kingsbury, and can he figure it out? I mean, this is a guy who's definitely on the hot seat, and there's questions about, his offense working in the NFL. It still exists. He's still kind of forcing some things, like you said, and he's going to have to figure out the best way to get this offense rolling. He's got a lot of talent at his disposal to work with, too.
Yeah, and I don't hate his offense. I just don't like it with this team. I think that it's a better offense. I think that what I want is, I said this in my video, was go full Bruce Arians. Go no risk it, no biscuit. Just start pushing the ball down the field. Because, again, Kyler down the field, he's ridiculous. He's amazing. These deep balls are perfect. And then you have, we'll get into it in a second, but DeAndre Hopkins, maybe the best deep ball receiver in the league. It's just such a great combination. Use that more than I think the 9% that they're throwing the ball 20 plus yards down the field. Make it 15%. Honestly, make it 20%. I mean, it's so good.
Yeah. Did Colt McCoy almost bump this up to a tier 2 for you?
definitely maybe factored in, maybe considered that.
Yeah, he's on his way up. He's a good young quarterback.
Yeah, okay. He's again. For those of you who are unaware, he's one of those guys that in my head I'm just still convinced is going to be good. No matter how, it'll be 30 years from now, and I'll still be like, watch out for Colt McCoy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of your criticisms with the offense. I think that they need to tweak some things, and this is a make or break year for them. So maybe they take a few more chances. And I still think Kyler Murray, under the right circumstances, can vault himself into the tier 2 category easily, which just raises the ceiling even further for this team.
Yeah. For halfbacks, this is a bit of an issue. Chase Edmonds and James Conner are both guys who I don't hate as a backup back. Not really the guy I want as a starting back. So this is actually tier 5 running back room for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. The Connor stuff that we saw last year was obviously glaringly bad. Now, how much of that was Pittsburgh? I still think he's going to struggle this year, and I think he's the clear backup. Chase Edmonds, I like as a receiver. I actually like him catching the ball out of the backfield, and I think that's going to be a really nice touch to this offense, too, especially if they want to stretch it more vertical. Having that outlet as the running back going out for passes will be nice. But as the lead back, that's going to be a little tough to see. Obviously, Kyler is going to play a big part of the running game, so I don't think it's a huge issue for this team. But at the same time, you just wish there was another guy there.
Yeah, and speaking of wishing there's another guy there, you talked about his receiving. Well, they might need his receiving because of who they have in the receiving core. DeAndre Hopkins, obviously, he's elite. He's one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in football. He's one of those guys where if someone says, I think Hopkins is the best in football, you say, sure. You don't really argue with that, even though you might have a different opinion. It's like, you could definitely make that argument. The question is just what else do they have? You have basically the corpse of AJ Green at this point, which we've seen veteran guys get into a new system and have some success, but I wouldn't bet on it necessarily. Then we have a bunch of guys who are second-round picks who I'm not too sure about. Christian Kirk, who was a former second-round pick. Andy Isabella, a former second-round pick. Rondell Moore, who they just drafted in the second round, who I don't love personally, although I do think he'll fit that offense well because he's good at screen passes and stuff, which is that whole air raid thing. Also have Keyshawn Johnson, not that one, the other one, a sixth-rounder from 2 years ago, who I remember having a really good preseason and then kind of didn't do a lot, so maybe keep your eye out for him. And then Max Williams, who is more of a blocker, but he's pretty solid for the tight end position. It's a tier 3 wide receiver room. It would be tier 5 without D-Hop. I mean, this offense needs DeAndre Hopkins. You talk about Seattle relying on guys. If DeAndre Hopkins is gone, I mean, put a fork in the Cardinals. They're done.
Yeah. I mean, he is I don't know if I have him as the best receiver in football. I still say Tyreek Hill's the weapon that I would not want to play the most. He may be the best 50-50 ball catcher I've ever seen. The way that he can just battle corners in the air and make catches is insane. And he does it really well with this team. And you mentioned Kyler's deep ball ability. It just caters to that. I think it's a huge benefit to them. AJ Green was interesting because his 11.1 yards per catch, it's not horrible, but at the same time, you look at it, he had like 47 catches on 104 targets. And that's horrible. That's really bad. I mean, that's really bad. But, like you said, sometimes we get a little bit of a resurgent year under the right circumstances. Maybe we can see it. Christian Kirk, is a guy who we kind of looked like, oh, this could be a guy for this team. Maybe with Larry Fitzgerald not there anymore, maybe he's a guy. I mean, I'm still not betting on a lot of this stuff, but I still think that there's options here that could get better and make this a little better. But, yeah, I mean, they need Hopkins on the field basically as much as possible.
Yeah, and they need this Rondell Moore pick to hit. They need to hit on that one because, again, you spend a second-round pick on a receiver. We've talked about receivers are notoriously difficult to figure out. I feel like they need that to hit.
Yeah, and this is an organization that has just done really well with receivers in the past. They had obviously Bolden, they had Larry Fitzgerald, they had who's the one guy? Michael Floyd, was that who it was?
Yeah. Super Bowl champion Michael Floyd.
Yeah, John Brown. They've just brought in all these guys and they've kind of worked for this team. Maybe they, a couple of these guys work out and more works out. This is a team that's just done well with receivers.
Yeah. To round out the offensive line, not horrible. You have DJ Humphries, who's solid, and Kevin Beachum, who's solid. So, maybe not spectacular, but you also have guys like for the guards, Justin Pugh and Justin Murray, who, again, these are guys who can play, and you followed up with one of the best, if not the best center in football, Rodney Hudson. Still don't know why the Raiders let him go. So that puts them it's a tier 3 offensive line for me. There's no real hole, and they do have someone who can, excel in Rodney Hudson.
Wow, I thought you'd want to have this one a little higher, honestly. You're such a Rodney Hudson guy. I mean, look, right. The thing is that I thought their tackles were pretty good last year. I kind of like this offensive line. I thought their tackles were pretty good. I thought their interior really struggled last year. So to fix the interior of your offensive line, you go and get the best center in football, maybe. I mean, that's a pretty good bargain for your team. So I kind of like this offensive line. I'm looking forward to watching this group. I think it's much improved based off the team from last year.
So where would you have it? Tier 1 through 5?
I don't know. I was kind of looking at this and felt like this was kind of a tier 2 group. I mean, it's probably in that 9 to 12 range, so I guess that's tier 2, tier 3. But it just kind of.
I gave them 13, so they're only a couple spots away from tier 2.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's appropriate. I think they're pretty close to tier 2, and I think they can hit tier 2 honestly by the end of the season if we're looking at this group, and I just think it can be a pretty good offensive line next season.
Yeah, so 18th best offense, and again, you're leaving wins on the table with all these tier 3s. I mean, they're tier 3 everywhere except for halfback, which is tier 5. Sticking with the tier 3 trend, we'll go to their coverage unit. The coverage unit is interesting because, Budda Baker, who I just love. I think that Budda Baker is fantastic. And Chris Banjo, who I like. So their safeties are good. You have the linebackers of Isaiah Simmons, who did slowly improve throughout the course of the season. I'm excited to see, especially give him a preseason. He's one of those guys who could have really used a preseason last year. They also have Jordan Hicks, who's a good coverage guy, and they drafted Xavier Collins in the first round last year, who's, sort of a big guy who can move. Their corners are where it gets interesting because you have Robert Alford, who I like, but I haven't seen him play since 2018 because no one has. He hasn't played since 2018. They added Malcolm Butler, which to me, that's a big addition. They needed another guy who can just play. Maybe he won't be elite, but he can play. Byron Murphy, who's another guy who I feel like him and Butler. Again, I'd rather have two solid corners than one great corner and one bad corner, and to have two solid corners with Murphy and Butler, and a Marco Wilson, a fourth rounder, who I think is probably should have been drafted earlier. It's a tier 3 coverage unit. A lot of it is because of not the corners, but the other stuff. But they have enough corners that I think they'll be okay. Maybe this is a team that should play a little bit more zone than they played last year, but I do have it as tier 3.
Yeah, I mean, this group's interesting, mainly because I feel like they changed a bunch of stuff, but I don't know if the stuff actually made them better. Malcolm Butler and Robert Alford for Patrick Peterson basically was the move. And yeah, like you said, we haven't seen Alford play. Although if they end up with Robert Alford at 2018, this can obviously be a pretty good coverage group. I think he's solid. I like him. So, if they have him and Butler and Murphy, I think that's a good, 3-man group. And obviously you mentioned Baker. And yeah, so I mean, I think there's ways this group can be pretty good. It's just, you got to see it all on the field because I'm not really sure if they actually improved this group overall. They just kind of changed a bunch of the pieces. And then I think I was on the record for this after the draft. I think Xavier Collins is a defensive rookie of the year candidate. I think he's a monster linebacker. I was really high on him out of going into the draft. And when he got drafted, he can cover the run. He can cover the pass. He can move. He's giant, like you said. He can even rush a little bit. I think he's a monster, and I think he's a defensive rookie of the year candidate.
Wow, interesting. I guess it makes. Again, there's no clear favorite for defensive rookie of the year. There's no Chase Young last year where it's like he's probably going to win it. I would say Malcolm Butler. If Malcolm Butler played like he played last year and Patrick Peterson played like he played last year, it's a big upgrade, I would say.
That's fair. That's fair. Peterson definitely had his struggles last season. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see this group all come together because I just feel like it's so many new pieces.
Oh, did we lose your video? Oh, we're back.
Oh,
okay.
I don't know why I did that. That was weird.
Yeah. Okay. I guess maybe, I don't know, some internet connection or something, whatever. Finishing off the Cardinals defense we'll do the front 7. So the interior, they have Zach Allen, Lakay Fatu, Fotu, and who are kind of, maybe above replacement level, but not much above replacement level. JJ Watt, I have listed as an interior guy simply because of their edge guys with Chandler Jones, who, as of today is still an Arizona Cardinal. You have Marquise Golden, and Devin Kennard, who are both above average players as well in their own right. Already mentioned the linebackers. So I have it as a tier 3 run defense. It was right at 16, so middle of the road run defense, but I have it as a tier 2 pass rush. I'm interested to see with Jones and JJ Watt, kind of a couple of veterans in there, how this goes. That puts their defense at 17th overall.
Yeah, and I really just hope Jones stays with this team for the year because I think this could be a really fun group to watch with him and Watt. If they can both stay healthy, I think that's a really potentially dominant group, honestly, with those two and getting after the quarterback. And then, you look at the other guys and, there's really no – I would say you look at this and there's not like glaring weak link with this group. I think that there's a bunch of solid players and then you have J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones who are potentially really good players. So, I think that's a pretty nice group in the front 7 that you can work with.
I think there's a bit of a weak link. I think other than on the inside, especially if J.J. Watt's playing the outside, I worry about the interior defensive line.
Yeah, I just don't think he's that guy anymore. Honestly, I feel like he's a 3-4 end now, or that's basically what I feel like he is. I don't think he has the same athleticism and explosiveness to play on the edge.
And quite frankly, last year he was damn good at it when he was with Houston, being a three. Yeah, so I think I have no issue with him there. But again, I would say that it's a bit top heavy, I guess, is what I would say with this front seven.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, but it's going to be interesting to see this group as a whole. Like I said, I just hope Chandler Jones plays because I think it can really raise the level of this team.
Yeah. So again, a lot of tier threes. I don't know how much this team is like, oh, they're debatably the best in the league at that. In fact, I think I would consider you crazy if you say they're the best at anything in the league. Matt Prater is a tier 2 kicker. So he's one of their best assets. This is a 7.75 win team for me. So it's just below 500. It puts about 21st in the NFL, though. So again, I'm not crazy high on Arizona. I like some of their players, but I think that we're going to have to see, for this team to make the playoffs, we're going to have to, at the very least, see tier 2 quarterback from Kyler Murray, which it's tough to put on the young guy, but that's kind of what we're at right now.
Yeah, and I think that that's where this team has the room to improve, though, is that, Kyler can take a leap. They have a pretty good offensive line in front of them now. Maybe Christian Kirk and AJ Green can morph into like a combination of a number 2 receiver numbers. Not that either one will have it individually. Maybe you get a little bit out of Rondale Moore as that third option. Then all of a sudden that's a solid receiver group. And then, part of this coverage unit gets a little better. If my prediction on Xavier Collins as the defensive rookie of the year comes true, that just makes this defense even better too. So I think there's room for this team to improve. It's just, is Cliff Kingsbury going to be the guy that put this team in the position to win? And also, can these guys make that leap this quickly and make this team good?
So here's my question. I have a question for you, Kyle.
Yes.
When you talk about the Seahawks, it was a lot of, well, what if this goes wrong? What if this goes wrong? With the Cardinals, it's, well, what if this goes right? What if this goes right? To me, when I'm saying those two questions, that's clearly I like the Seahawks better than the Cardinals. You have it the other way. Why do you feel that way?
I don't know. Well, like I said, I just think a lot of this stuff with the Seahawks, I haven't loved their offseason. I haven't loved a lot of the conversations about this team in the offseason. And I just feel like from what I've seen from Pete Carroll with this team, I don't know if he's willing to make the adjustments necessary to make this team to the level that I think it can be and where it will be. And I think that's the biggest problem I have with the Seahawks and why I could see the bottom kind of falling off on them this season. And then Russell Wilson asking out and wanting to leave the organization and that kind of stuff. I mean, like I said, I think that there's teams that kind of just fall off the cliff and then all of a sudden it's just over and they're blowing things up. And I just wouldn't be surprised if the Seahawks are this team this year.
Yeah, KD says, it's KAYD says, Seahawks have big holes. It is true. I guess I'm okay with a team that's top heavy if the top heaviness is, one of the best quarterbacks in football. So I guess we'll see. That's where
these two teams are basically complete opposites, right? The Seahawks have, like, it's either tier 1 or tier 5, and then the Cardinals are all tier 3 across the board. So it's kind of funny to look at the contrast. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that is very, very funny, and I guess that's where the disagreement comes in. I say I'd rather have a team that really excels at the most important parts of football, and you say you'd rather have a team that just doesn't have those holes. And so it should be interesting to see how it works out. Yeah,
I think it'll be really interesting. That being said, even though I think I see a realistic scenario where all of these teams make the playoffs, I have these two teams above them pretty significantly. And that's just my opinion. So I have these two teams kind of above. Number 2, I was going back and forth with these two teams. I ended up putting the San Francisco 49ers at number 2. I'm really excited to see this team healthy and working. I think the biggest question for this team is going to be, can Jimmy Garoppolo play good enough to, can we get enough from Jimmy Garoppolo to put this team in the conversation as division winner, Super Bowl contender again? We saw it a couple years ago from him. He wasn't healthy last season. Now the pressure's on for him to compete and perform because Trey Lance is right behind him and Josh Rosen's right behind him. Don't sleep on Rosen yet. There's all these, Lance is chomping at the bit, ready to play, though. And, is that going to put the pressure on him? And can he perform? And then if Lance needs to come in, can Lance be that guy? I'm not sure he's ready to be that guy right away. That's why I have some questions about the 49ers. I still think they're a lock for a playoff team as long as they stay healthy and they don't have the season from hell like last year. I just have them a little step below the Rams, and that's why I have them at number 2.
I gotta be honest. Trey Lance is one of the biggest wild cards that I have. I don't know how to evaluate someone from North Dakota State. So there's a lot I liked from him. I liked what I saw from him, but again, it's like, well, he never really had to do that. You talk about lack of competition. I mean, that was he was basically playing on like an NFL team going up against like high school kids. That kind of what it felt like with the obviously bit of an exaggeration, but he's very interesting. And I don't know. I guess to me, the way I view it, so the quarterback room I gave as tier 3 with Jimmy G / Trey Lance. I guess I kind of think, why would you give 3 first-round picks for a guy who's not going to start? Like, I just feel like if you're going to give 3 first-round picks, you're going to do it for a guy who you're willing to, have start. I would think.
I mean, we barely hit August and they're already talking about him starting. So, I mean, it just seems like that's kind of how it's going to go. I kind of see it happening that way. If it's not week 1, I think it's going to be sooner rather than later. The question is going to be, is this going to be a situation like Miami where even if this team's like 4-0, are they going to be like, hey, Trey Lance is our guy. He puts us in the best position to win, even if it's not necessarily the case. I mean, that's the thing I'm looking at. Now, I mean, I've always kind of thought Jimmy Garoppolo is overrated, but he also doesn't ruin your team season. You definitely can say we can win despite Jimmy Garoppolo. If Trey Lance struggles a little bit as a rookie, is that going to be a situation then where you're going back to Garoppolo and derailing his confidence? How's that all going to balance out? I mean, it's the toughest question for teams with young quarterbacks. How do they balance this, especially when they're a competitive team like Miami last year, or like San Francisco this year?
Yeah, it's so much easier when you're Jacksonville and you can just say, our goal this year is to make sure Trevor Lawrence is in the best position to succeed, for the next couple of years. That's what we're doing. It's a very compelling question. To me, I think so. We'll talk about Kyle Shanahan, who I had as the 8th best head coach. So they're getting about just under half a win from him alone. To me, I think what they do is if they're 4-0 with Jimmy G, I think they stick with Jimmy G. I don't think they do what Miami did, where Miami said, well, we'd be better winning with Fitzpatrick, but we're going to put Tua in to build for the future. I think they would say, if we can win now, we'll try to win now, because they did go to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo, and it wasn't like a fluke Super Bowl. Like, they earned that Super Bowl appearance.
Yeah, I mean, they were the best team in the NFC that season. So,
yeah.
I mean, I think it's going to be a really interesting balance. And that's going to be the biggest conversation about this team all year, right? Until Trey Lance actually comes in and starts playing. And even after then, it's going to be an interesting thing how that balances. And, is there going to be questions about that group then?
Yeah, it's so interesting. We'll talk about the running game for a second. So this could be where, I'll be honest, my system might be a bit flawed here when thinking about it, because the running game I have, there's Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Trey Sermon, who is a 3rd-round selection, and Wayne Gallman, who I like actually. I have it as a tier 4 running back room because they have a lot of guys who are solid. I don't know who I would say is like a great running back, but they have a lot of bodies in the room. But the interesting thing is, I talk so much about how if you have that elite running back, well, opposing teams basically have to focus on stopping the run, so then you can throw over the top of them and get yards that way, similar to like a Derrick Henry in Tennessee. Well, Kyle Shanahan doesn't need elite running backs to do so. So you can make the argument that they're getting that 2.5 wins with the running back room being elite, even though they don't actually have that kind of talent in the running back room.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to perform like a tier 2 or tier 1 running back room. And they did it again. They got a guy like Gallman, who I think is solid. I don't hate Jeff Wilson Jr. I like Mostert when he's on the field for those 5 games this season. I really like Trey Sermon in the draft too. They got 4 or 5 guys that are just going to find a way to perform because that's what they do. So, I mean, yeah, I understand why it's a tier 4 group, but I just know it's going to perform like a tier 1 group. So you just have to adjust with that what you will.
Yeah, I think my favorite Raheem Mostert moment was in the NFC Championship game when they interviewed him after the game, and it said at the end they said, "Good luck in the Super Bowl," and he said, "Thanks, you too."
Yeah, I mean, he just hasn't been on the field much. I mean, the guy, he's one of those guys where it's like, it's not quite the situation when you say Raheem Mostert if he's healthy, but at the same time, Raheem Mostert's never healthy. So you
Mm-hmm.
hope he can be on the field because, I mean, he is quite an electric running back when he's actually out there. He's just not out there enough.
Yeah. For wide receivers / tight ends, you have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, who had a real underrated season last year as a rookie. He's someone I've been a fan of for a minute now. You also have Richie James, who is solid, fine, whatever. They also got Jalen Hurd, who I will not give up hope on Jalen Hurd. He was one of my guys when he got drafted, has yet to play due to injuries. It's been so unfortunate what's happened with him. I would love to see him just get some playing time. Mohamed Sanu as well, they added, so to reunite the Kyle Shanahan loves to bring guys who he's coached before back. And then, George Kittle, who's insane. So this is the tier 2 receiving room for me. I mean, I like Deebo Samuel. I like Brandon Ayuk. And George Kittle's the number one option. And when you add that on with guys who can play, and there's some flyers on Hurd or Sanu, this is tier 2 to me.
Yeah. Fantasy sleeper. I mentioned one with DeAndre Swift last week or 2 weeks ago with the NFC North preview. I think Brandon Ayuk's going to perform like a top 20 receiver this season. I think he's going to become the clear-cut 1B option for this team. I think he's electric. I think they're going to find ways to put the ball in his hands as much as possible, whether it's jet sweep, reverse, screen passes. I mean, basically everything they did with him last year, just even more so. I think he's an electric player, and I think he's going to be awesome again for this team. And I think he's going to vault himself into the conversation as one of the, he'll be a top 20, 25 receiver in the league, and they'll talk about him being a top 5 receiver in the league because that's what we do. But I think that's where he's going to be by the end of the season.
Also, I'm not sure if there's a comment I saw. If I said Jalen Hurts, that's not. I meant Jalen Hurd. I'm not sure if I said the right thing, but Jalen Hurd, of course, is not Jalen Hurts. That's the quarterback for Philadelphia. To round out the offensive line, Trent Williams, who's just incredible. They paid him $1 billion, and for a good reason. He's maybe the best tackle in football. You have Mike McGillney, who's I think 49ers fans don't like, but I think they're just sort of a bit spoiled with how good with what else they have around their offensive line. He's good. For the guards, you have Laken Tomlinson, and then Aaron Banks, who is a second-round selection. Center Alex Mack. This is a tier 2 offensive line. I have a little bit of questions about Aaron Banks and Alex Mack at this point in his career. Will he still be great? But there's three guys who I really like, so this is still a tier 2 offensive line for me.
It is definitely tier 2 for me because there's one guy you're sleeping on here, and he's so important to this team. And I got to give him for love because there's only like 5 of them left in the NFL. Kyle Yuschik, best fullback in football. Give credit to the fullback. Show him some love. He's a terrific blocker. He also does a lot of other things for this team too. He can run, he can catch.
I should have put him in the receiving option because he does that.
Yeah, I mean he's awesome. So I think he adds that 6th offensive lineman to this group too. So I think he's awesome for this team.
Yeah, I love Yuschik. I think Yuschik is you're right. You're absolutely right. He's fantastic. And hey, we could sit here and say, fullbacks, what do they matter? The Patriots won a Super Bowl a couple years ago with a big part because of James Devlin's blocking. And quite frankly, in the Super Bowl with Yuschik, he had nearly 2 touchdowns. He had 1, and he got to the 1-yard line on another play. So he does a lot. That's a good call by you. So their offense I have as the 11th best offense in football.
Yeah, 11th best, and then, if we talked about, too, with the running back group, it's probably a group you can grade a little higher, too, if you're willing to say, yeah, there's no star in this running back group, but they're going to perform that high. You maybe add a little bit more to that, too. So, I mean, I think that this is a pretty complete offense.
I'm thinking about this. If you see a 49ers fan who has a Yuschik jersey, that's got to be like your favorite fan, right? That's the guy you're just like, that's a great choice getting that jersey.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, it'll be a sad day in football when the fullback dies. I mean, unfortunately, it is going to happen, and it's going to be the saddest day in football history. But fullbacks live on forever. So
yes, they'll live on forever in our hearts. Moving on to defense, you have for the corners, you have Jason Verrett, who was good last year, and again, he's one of those guys who we sort of say, like, for like a Robert Alford, he hasn't played in a few years. Well, Verrett was the guy who hadn't played in 1,000 years and then comes in and actually plays well. So hopefully he can do it in a season that matters in 2021. because they were out of it last year. You have Emmanuel Mosley, Kawan Williams, who has never had more than 734 snaps in his 6-year career, but I actually could see him being sort of a solid number 2 corner. You also have Ambry Thomas, who they selected in the 3rd round. For their safeties, you have Jaquez Tart, Jimmy Ward, who are both good. And then, linebackers, Dre Greenlaw, who's good in coverage. And probably their best coverage player is a linebacker, Fred Warner, who's just incredible. So it's a tier 3 coverage unit. Again, this is a team who likes to play a lot of zone. At least that's what we saw last year. They would mix it up. Again, Robert Saleh's gone. What exactly will they do? But I have it as a tier 3 coverage unit.
Yeah, I mean, that feels fair. I mean, I think the one thing when you look at this team to the Seahawks, who also run a ton of zone, is they have that superstar middle linebacker in Fred Warner, who's, might be as good as Bobby Wagner. He's pretty close. But they also have good players around him, too. And it's not like there's a lot of holes to this team, which I think, really helps this team overall. Hopefully he figures out some of his stuff off the field first, but maybe this Richard Sherman as a late return after missing some, taking the training camp off kind of thing. But obviously there's a whole nother story to that. So we'll see, but that would only raise the ceiling to this group because I still think it's pretty good everywhere else overall.
Yeah. And for front 7, the interior, you have Zach Kerr, you have Javon Kinlaw, who I'm looking forward to see. I think Kinlaw could be a sort of a breakout candidate, that 2nd-year jump type guy. And you also added Maurice Hurst from Las Vegas. And then for the edge, it's you got Eric Armstead, you got Fred Warner. To me, I have this as a tier 2 run defense and a tier 2 pass rush, which puts their defense at 15th in the NFL because I do weigh coverage a lot more than those other stuff. But it's a good defense. It's a good offense. I have their, Robbie Gould tier 3. What do you think about this front 7?
I mean, we've said this before. Defensive tackles take a while. It would make perfect sense if Kinlaw's a lot better this season and then him and Armstead become very good. I think the one question is, if Nick Bosa becomes Joey Bosa level with D Ford across from him, is this a tier 2 or a tier 1 pass rush group?
Probably tier 1, because quite frankly, I don't have D Ford as a top 2 edge rusher in this group. I like D Ford, but I think Eric Armstead is better. And again, Armstead plays all over, so you can argue. But I think probably tier 1. I mean, again, I'd have to look up. I can look up who's tier 1. It probably feels like tier 1, but I mean, yeah. This edge rush group, it's a huge part of why they went to the Super Bowl. Although I think, again, Pro Football Focus graded them as the best coverage unit in the league that year as well. So that's why their defense was so successful. But obviously, the edge rush is something that they value in San Francisco.
Yeah, so obviously, Bosa being on the field is the most important thing because, even if he's not Joey Bosa that you have to remind us all the time, he's still a terrific defensive end. So I think that's important. And I just like a lot of the players in this team, right? You go through the list and it's like, oh, I like Armstead. Oh, I like Bosa. Oh, Fred Warner's awesome. You just go through this team and it's like you like every player on this roster, basically. You don't really feel like there's a ton of holes, even if it's ranked a little lower.
Yeah, well, I mean, Joey Bosa's better. What do you want me to say? Nick Bosa had a good rookie season, and everyone's like, wow. It's like, wait a second. Joey Bosa's the better player. Joey Bosa's been better for years. Okay, great. Nick Bosa had one bad Joey Bosa season. Let's not now pretend like he's the better Bosa brother.
I just got him riled up for no reason. But, I mean, they're both awesome. But, yeah, Joey is better right now, but Nick is terrific. And, now that he's healthy, he could take another leap too. So, just make this team even better.
Yeah. Also, I looked it up. Right now I have the worst tier 1 edge unit is the Bears with, a big part of that. That's basically just Khalil Mack on their team. So that it's, would you rather have 2 good guys or one of the best in the league? It's debatable. But yeah, so I have this team as a 10.26 win team. I had the Seahawks as the second wildcard team. I have this team 12th in the NFL, 7th in the NFC. I have them as a wildcard team. I think this is a fringe playoff team, but I do have them as a playoff team right now.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like a 3 playoff team division. Like I said, I think there's a realistic map for all of these teams to make the playoffs from this division, but it's just going to be very hard for the 4th team to make it. But I do see 3 teams making it from this group, especially with the level that the 49ers are at. I do think that they're in. I just feel like based on what we saw 2 years ago, I think it's going to be closer to that, closer than what we saw this season, obviously with all the injuries. So I think they're going to be a terrific team.
Yeah, and I hope so too. Because again, I don't know what it is. I'm a believer in this. I don't know if you believe in this. I like seeing a team that when they are like playing in a big game, it feels more than just a big game. It feels more than just a single Super Bowl. But like a team like San Francisco with the history they have, I want to see them do good. That's just how I feel about it. I know that yes, it would be great if Cleveland wins a Super Bowl, but from my personal enjoyment of it, it's cool to see like a historic team like San Francisco do well.
I mean, the league is better when the best franchises are also good too. Except for the Cowboys, because it's always fun to laugh at the Cowboys. But every other good franchise, it's fun to see win. So
right. It's good to see that like the 49ers, the Patriots, the Buccaneers, the true cream of the crop franchises.
Everybody loves seeing the Patriots win. I can't think of one person who hates the Patriots.
But here's my thing. I like seeing the Patriots do well. I want to see them lose, but I care when I'm watching the Patriots. When the Niners played the Chiefs, those were kind of which again, those are kind of 2 historic franchises, but it didn't have the same feel as like when the Eagles played the Patriots. That felt like just such a bigger deal.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's fair. I completely get it. We derailed this a little bit, so we'll go on to
Yeah.
So the number one team. Yeah, so we're going with the Los Angeles Rams here at number 1. I mean, this is already a very good team from last year. They obviously lost Brandon Staley, which might move their defense down a little bit, but I still think there's a ton of really good players in that defense. And then, I mean, the clear-cut option at number 1 is that they are – oh, hi, dog. They are borderline elite at quarterback now, which is what they were not last season. They're borderline elite now with Matthew Stafford coming in, and I think this raises the ceiling of this team even further to where they're already a Super Bowl contender. They might be one of the 2 or 3 favorites in the NFC this season. I think this is a terrific team from top to bottom. They've said, screw you first-round picks, we're going for a Super Bowl, and they might just do it this season. So I got the Rams here at number 1 in the NFC West.
Yeah, this is the right decision. This is the team I have as number 1 as well. It feels kind of this feels like a championship contending team. It all starts with the head coach Sean McVay, who was I gave us 6th best in my coaching rankings. So here's someone I want to give a shout out to: Raheem Morris, defensive coordinator for the Rams. Sean McVay does such a good job of getting defensive coordinators. Raheem Morris feels like the kind of guy who is going to come in here, light the world on fire, and in a year or 2 get a head coaching gig.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, there was debate that he should have got one this year, right? So, I mean, I think it's going to be a really good situation for him. It still allows the Rams to kind of be great at defense, and McVay kind of gets to hand it off on someone who is really good at his job. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this group because is he going to basically say, hey, this worked last season, let's keep it the same? Is he going to add some of his own stuff? I don't know how much his in Staley's system translate, but overall, I still think it's going to be a pretty good group because the talent's there.
Yeah, I would imagine from what I've seen with Morris, and again, he was a head coach for Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a bit ago. Again, he might end up being one of the guys who's had a longer gap between being a head coach if he does get another job. Because the way I see him is he tends to coach a little bit egoless, and I think that he probably will do a lot more of what Staley did, and maybe just add some little things to it. I would presume.
I'd imagine so too. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel with this team. They have so much talent, so I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. You already talked about him. Quarterback Matt Stafford. He's tier 2. He's not tier 1, but he's a really good quarterback at this point in his career, and it's definitely an upgrade from Goff.
Yeah, I mean, did you have him 7th or 8th overall?
8th.
Yeah, I mean that seems right. I mean, so I think it's perfectly fair that he's there. And while I don't know he's going to be the MVP of the league, like he's getting some buzz on some gambling sites for some good odds. Okay. I don't know if he's going to be the MVP of the league. I think he's going to be pretty darn good and put this team in the position to win a lot of games this season and potentially win a Super Bowl. I mean, I just think it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at the two guys and say he's better than Jared Goff, but he's a significant upgrade, I feel like, over Jared Goff that already makes a very good offense even that much more dangerous.
Yeah, and I mean, first off, I do kind of always feel like the dark horse MVP candidate is always a kiss of death. I feel like every time someone says this guy's a dark horse MVP candidate, it ends up horrible. That's just something that I've noticed. But I would say it's like when you can upgrade the quarterback position, it's basically always worth it. I mean, you think about the difference between, according to Mike's ranking system, it's about a 2-win difference from being a tier 4, which is probably where Goff was at last year, to a tier 2 where I have Stafford. You'll give up 2 first-round picks for that, any day of the week.
Yeah, and I should say too, it wasn't even really like a dark horse candidate. There was a stretch I think in June that I saw he was the 4th highest MVP odds. So there were some people really high on Matt Stafford to have a big season. And I think he is going to be terrific. I don't know if he's going to be the 4th best quarterback in football terrific, but he's going to be up in the conversation.
Yeah, probably not. And maybe they just feel like the Rams will win enough games that, team wins tends to matter for that award. For halfbacks, I like Cam Akers. I believe there's the injury stuff there. You also have Darrell Henderson. It's a tier 3 running back room for me.
Yeah, the Cam Akers thing really hurts. I was really looking forward to watching him this season. He's out for the year with the Achilles injury. I still think Henderson's pretty good. That being said, I thought he was a better number 2 option than number 1 option. And this could be like, maybe we'll get a mid-season addition to this team to kind of fix that. But at the same time, I think with their passing game, I think they're going to throw it a ton more than we even expect this season. I think people are already expecting more passes this season. I think it's going to be even further than we expect that. I'm not overly worried about the running game overall.
Yeah, I should also mention, I made this rankings, I created this all like 2 months ago. I have not yet updated the halfback rankings. Maybe, I think they probably would still end up being at tier 3. Maybe it would have dropped. But again, the difference between tier 2, 3, 4, and 5 halfbacks don't do too much. It's only tier 1, which I don't think they are. Wide receiving room. It's a good spot for them. It's tier 3 for me. You have Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. You have, for their number 3 guys, you have Van Jefferson, who I think is a fine number 3. They also added Deshaun Jackson and Tutu Atwell, who kind of do a similar thing. I think they're probably going to mainly be used as guys who sort of, can run those jet sweeps and things that the Rams love to do. You also have Tyler Higbee, who's a solid blocker and a very good receiver. It's a tier 3 for me.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of really good options with this group. I think that they're going to be very good. And then I think a sleeper to look at with this team too is Tyler Higbee. I think is just there was some weird numbers that I saw that when Gerald Everett wasn't playing, he was awesome for the Rams. He was an awesome tight end for them. And then when Gerald Everett came back, he kind of, sunk down closer to mid-tier tight end. So he could be another fantasy sleeper for you if you're looking for that. I think he could be an awesome player for this team this year. And then, I think top to bottom, there's just not a whole lot of weaknesses with this group. And if they can get anything out of Deshaun Jackson, that's, I think he's a pretty good wide receiver already still, even at his age. If they get anything out of him, this is even better than expected.
Over under for Deshaun Jackson, 1 50-plus yard touchdown.
So 2? Yeah, I'll take over.
Yeah, I think I take over too. Good. He's not. The thing about Deshaun Jackson, he's one of those players with him having some impact will be like a couple of 70-yard touchdowns.
I mean, they're going to have situations where they're basically sending him and Cooper Kupp deep. And then you have to worry about Robert Woods, Tyler Higbee, and maybe Van Jefferson coming across the middle of the field or walking the, mid-tier routes. That's really hard to defend, especially, talents like Kupp and Jackson.
Yeah. Some people even say Robert Woods is the best receiver in football. And that by some people, I mean, Troy Aikman said that once, which was insane.
Yeah. Hey, he's a top 5 wide receiver for me. No doubt about it.
Exactly. Offensive line to round out the offense. You have Andrew Whitworth, who, continues to do well. Don't know why Cincinnati gave up on him those years ago. That was stupid. Rob Havenstein. You got for the interior, Davis Edwards and Austin Corbett. You also have Brian Allen, who's kind of been replacement level. and 600 career snaps over 2 years. That's probably the weakness of this offensive line, but everywhere else is really good. It's a tier 2 offensive line for me. You can deal with one weaker guy on the interior, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the one thing with, once again, sometimes you can say, oh, when a guy gets hurt, of course it's going to get worse for them. Andrew Whitworth getting hurt last year really hurt this team, I thought. And he's also 39 now. So, I mean, you can kind of say, oh, it's Whitworth. He'll just keep churning along because that's what he does. But at the same time, I mean, he can't do it forever, too. So I think that's the one question you have with the Rams. But overall, it's still a really good offensive line.
Yeah, so offense, 9th best in football. It gets better when we go over to defense. Their coverage, I actually don't have as tier 1. I have as tier 2. They did lose some talent to Cleveland. Cleveland's got all their guys. You got Jalen Ramsey, though, and Darius Williams, who that's what this defense, in my opinion, that's what the defense is built around. Obviously, Aaron Donald as well, but it's really those 3 guys. The rest is, you have Robert Rochelle at corner, who was a 4th rounder, and I don't know if he's the 5th DB, but he might be. For the safeties, you have Taylor Rapp and Jordan Fuller, who I think will be fine. Again, you lose a talent. It did happen, but I think they're still okay there. And with linebackers, Troy Reeder, who's sort of an okay all-around guy, and Micah Kaiser, who sucks at coverage, but the Rams, for whatever reason, no matter how, they could have you and me out there at linebacker and they'd be fine. That's just the way that their defense seems to work. So I have it as tier 2, and the main reason why they're still tier 2 is Ramsey and Williams. The reason why they're not tier 1 is just sort of the depth around that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously losing Johnson and Hill is going to hurt a little bit, but at the same time, they have 2 stars at cornerback, like you said, and this is a coverage group. You've said it this whole thing. Coverage is important. Having 2 really good corners obviously is really going to help your defense. Like you said, they can kind of get away with having bad linebackers because they got terrific coverage guys out there out wide. So I think it's going to be really good again. I'm not too worried about the losses, even though it might hurt it a little bit and might, it may not be the best secondary in football next season, but it's still, like you said, it's still going to be a top 10 group next year. And it just helps that they have good players up front too.
Yeah, and speaking of that, they got Aaron Donald. I mean, you only need Aaron Donald up front, really, but they have some other guys as well. You have Sebastian Joseph Day, who I've always felt like is a bit underrated. You also have for the edge guys, you got Leonard Floyd, who is good. You have Justin Hollins, who's solid. And I've already mentioned the linebackers. I have this as a tier 1 run defense and a tier 1 pass rush. I don't know where they would be without Aaron Donald, but with Aaron Donald, they're fantastic. So I have this as a tier 2 coverage, tier 1 run defense, tier 1 pass rush. That puts them at the best defense in football for me.
Yeah, breaking news, Aaron Donald's really good at football. That's kind of my analysis of this front 7. I mean, he just does so much for this team, and I mean, there's no other way to put it. He's fantastic. And he's fantastic. He makes up a lot for this team. He can pass rush. He can defend the run. He can do it all. I think he's a fantastic player. And there's still some good players around him too. I like Leonard Floyd still. There's still plenty of guys on this team. I think they're really talented.
Yeah. Like when someone will say like, oh, I don't know, Khalil Mack is the best edge rusher ever, and someone will say, no, he's not better than Lawrence Taylor, and it just seems like a complete shutdown. I feel like in 10 years from now, someone will say, oh, this is the best defensive tackle in football ever, and we'll say, like, no, he's not Aaron Donald. Like, he just feels like that guy who he's just going to be, he's the Deion Sanders. He's like the obvious best of all time.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be kids who didn't watch him play who just aren't going to understand how dominant he is. So, yeah, I mean, he's fantastic. He makes this group – I mean, he really elevates this group from maybe a top 10 defense to the number 1 defense by himself. That's how crazy it is.
Yeah, and, I'm not even someone who values run, edge rushing or pass rushing, I should say, that highly. But even with where I say, like, where I put it, he's still probably worth the contract because also what he does in the running game as well. I think he's fantastic.
Yeah, and he's almost, set this trend where you're seeing these guys. I know Chris Jones is another one who's kind of the poor man's Aaron Donald, even though he's still fantastic. Where it's just like.
By the way, huge compliment to Chris Jones by saying that. Like it really is. Chris Jones is great, but he probably would be thrilled with that comment.
Yeah, I mean, but isn't it kind of to the point now where you have that kind of? I almost feel like that the pass rushing interior defensive lineman has become more valuable than the edge rusher. And a guy like Donald can really set the trend like that, where we're going to see more and more guys like this. And I think that's just going to become the value position on the defensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if there's one day a market shift on this, where we're seeing more and more defensive tackles paid compared to defensive ends. And it's because these guys can rush the passer and defend the run from the middle. And I think it's going to change things.
Well, I mean, again, like what the numbers say is that a great run defender is worth more than a great edge rusher, just period.
Yeah, and when he can do both,
right?
Why even pay the edge rusher?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Further, kicker Matt Gay, it's a tier 5. He's shown some flashes. Maybe he can turn it around, but still, 9th best offense, 1st best, or just best defense. This is a 12.2 win team. That's 4th best in the NFL, 2nd best in the NFC. This feels like, if it's not Tampa, it's probably the Rams out of the NFC, I would say.
Yeah, I haven't made my full predictions yet, but it really does feel like that it's a 3-team race right now. I think San Francisco can put themselves in the conversation. I still think there's so much talent on that team. And like I said, you just go through that roster and you don't hate anybody on it. And if Lance is good in year 1, maybe they are in that. They make themselves that 4th team. But right now, it just feels like it's Buccaneers, Rams, and Packers, and then we're going to figure it out from there. I think they're still in that conversation, and they're, like I said, they're a terrific team and have some superstars to back it up.
Yeah, so I made a video today that was which teams have the most pressure to win a Super Bowl. The Rams and the Seahawks finished very high on that list. Would you agree with that? I mean, these two teams feel like they're kind of the teams where they lose the Super Bowl, it's a bad season.
The Rams and the Seahawks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Especially the Rams have invested so much basically into being good right now. Their window is basically this year and next year. And I think after that is when the money starts, the bill starts having to get paid. Or maybe it's after this year. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, they've invested so much into being good right now and making sure this team's ready to win. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're number 1 right now. They've invested so much to make sure McVay gets that Super Bowl. I think the Seahawks are in the conversation because I think people are just so over Pete Carroll right now. And I think part of it is that situation and Wilson, dropping hints that he's unhappy. I would put the Packers at number 2, honestly, though. I think the Packers are ahead of the Seahawks, but behind Los Angeles.
Oh, I think Packers are number 1. I think that they, with their whole Aaron Rodgers thing, I think they're the biggest. I put them as number 1. I'm just saying these are 2 of the biggest. Yeah,
no doubt about that. I think it's completely fair.
Yeah. All right. So I guess that's our show. This was, Kyle, it was fun. I missed doing this last week.
Yeah, it's been a while. We're back to it now. Like we said, sorry for missing a week, but we also have lives too, so sometimes that takes precedent. But we will be back, like you said, Sunday at 5 o'clock Eastern. We're getting back to it. We're wrapping up this division rankings with the NFC South. We're going to Jackson's division. We're going down to Florida. And, my sources say that there's a good chance Tampa Bay is the number 1 team in the division next season.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we don't need to. Yeah, that's who I have as number 1. Yeah.
Yeah, not to spoil too much. We'll save the rest for the show, but there's a good chance that Tampa Bay is looking pretty good next season.
Yeah, it should be fun though. Again, and we'll wrap it up. I guess we could do this live on air. Why not? Do you want to also do sort of the full preview then as well of doing who we think is going to, win the Super Bowl and all of that stuff? Who's going to win, MVP, offensive rookie of the year and all that stuff?
Yeah, so we'll go through that. As he was saying, we'll do the NFC South preview. We'll wrap that up. That will be all 8 of our divisions. Then from there, we will rank each of the 7 teams? Yeah. All 14 playoff teams, we'll rank them 1 through 7 in each conference. And then we'll say this team is going to play this team in the Super Bowl. And then we're going to do all the major awards, maybe besides comeback player of the year, even though that's going to be Dak Prescott. That's Dak Prescott. Just bet that.
Yeah.
But outside of that, we'll do all the other major award winners along with Super Bowl picks. And that'll be our football preview as we get ready. We're getting closer. We had football while we were gone too. Exciting stuff.
Did you watch that game?
No, I did not. But I did see that there was football on TV, and I got a little excited. I don't know. The Hall of Fame game is weird to me. The only thing I noticed NFL-wise over the last week was they did Peyton Manning's Hall of Fame bust, and his forehead is half the size of what it actually is.
Yeah,
I don't know
insane.
how they messed this up so badly.
Yeah.
The man's got a giant, one of those ones you can really land a plane on, and I think he bullied them into cutting it in half.
Archie Manning did. It was Archie. It had to be. There's been this part of my take theory that Archie Manning runs the league. It had to have been Archie Manning.
Yeah, I mean it might have been. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
It's I don't know. That was the one thing I didn't notice, and I mean, congrats to Peyton Manning. That was pretty cool to see too.
Yeah, very fun. So just to recap, we'll be doing NFC South preview. Then we'll do a bracket of who's going to win each game in the playoffs, who's going to eventually win the Super Bowl. We'll then talk about our picks for Coach of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, and MVP. Sound good?
Yep, I'm in. Let's do it.
All right. So we will be back 6 days from today. Thank you to everyone who watched live or watched after the fact or just listened to it on the podcast only feed, which of course anywhere you get your podcast you can find. And Kyle, any final thoughts before we head out?
No, just make sure to follow us on Twitter. Make sure to follow him at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Gronin. That's GRONDIN by Kyle Gronin on Twitter. And then make sure to follow the account page. That's at On the Sideline JK on Twitter. At On the Sideline JK. We'll make sure to put in any show updates if we have to miss another week, although that's probably not going to happen. You'll see that on our Twitter page. That's at On the Sideline JK on Twitter.
Yes. All right. And yes, again, thanks to everyone for watching. We appreciate it. And of course, as always, have a good one.
Peace.